Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dr. Laura Patrick and I will be your MC for this evening. On behalf of the Foundation, we would just wish to thank you all for coming out. As Stephen said, it's the trifecta of issues tonight: traffic, weather and Disney on Ice, and Christmas, of course. Special thank you to our designer Wendy and her husband Dermot, who are here tonight, who have been working with the Ulster Historical Foundation for more than 30 years. And she's produced another beautiful book. If you haven't bought it, go and buy it. I've now got 2 copies to take home with me. Sucker for a book. And we'll hear more about the book shortly from Andrew. So I'm sure some of you who have no idea who I am, wondering why I am giving the MC in the introduction tonight. So Andrew and I met about 2 years ago. I did a talk for the Ulster Archaeological Society, archaeologist by trade, and I had been studying the cultural landscapes of late medieval Gaelic Ulster. And I got very embroiled and obsessed, as much as Andrew, with townlands and how we can use them to look at geopolitics, at culture, at what land was used for. And Andrew and I just clicked, fellow obsessives. And I was delighted to see the publication finally come to fruition. We keep saying if we'd met each other 4 years earlier, both my PhD and his book would have been much easier, but here we are. So Andrew himself hails from the townland of Culhill. Andrew grew up in an area where the older generations used townland names as in the daily language. They would have spoke to visits to friends and relatives, and they would have referred to this as heading to Claggan or Dalachi, Letterowan, Nismoyle. This made perfect sense in a farming community where the network of lanes meant houses could often be accessed from different roads. Street addresses were kept for the towns. He now lives in Templepatrick, where the village, rather prosaically, shares its name with the Townland parish in which it's located. Andrew works as a researcher consultant for the Ulster Historical Foundation, handling a wide range of mainly genealogical commissions and assisting with the delivery of their courses. He has published the well-received town book of Coleraine and has contributed to genealogical journals and magazines, but I feel that the book that you're about to find out more about tonight has been a real labour of love. And the floor is yours, Andrew. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Laura. And, well, this is what we've all been waiting for. I don't know about you. Oh, I do. Quite a lot of you have been saying, when's the book going to come out? And I've been sitting on the edge of my seat going, it's finally here. It's finally here. You can actually pick it up and set it down again quite quickly because it's very heavy. But, yes, I've just realised I have to stand here to be in the little screen.
I can hear you.
Yeah, no, it's for the video. First of all, let me start off. This is an example of Wendy's wonderful design work, which she did for the front cover. Really encapsulates all the variety and range of townland names that we have over the 9 counties of Ulster. It's just, they're not, people have been asking me, are they close to their actual location? No, not really. They're just where they'll fit in. But that just makes it even more interesting because you can look around and just see all the names and then go and find out where they are. So, if I switch on my little device, it's better. Just hit the button. Okay, here we are, the Townland Atlas of Ulster, the launch. Okay, I'll tell you a little bit about the origins of the book, as I've made why it really came to be in its current format. Okay, there have been genealogical atlases before. Brian Mitchell's book back in I think the 1980s. It's a great book. I feel it's very underused, but it doesn't go really below parish level. And we really need something. Townlands are so fundamental to research in Ireland that we need something more precise. Also, I wanted the book to give context to those townlands. There's no point in just having a page with a lot of names on it. We really need to see exactly where things are in relation to each other, and in terms of parishes and in terms of estates, just generally what people cared about back in the times that we're reading about. They needed to meet the needs of the researcher. It was really essentially as a research guide that I designed the book, and it wasn't to give you all the answers, but to help the researcher know where to go to find the answers for themselves and direct straight to that without sort of fumbling about in the dark, which is often the case. And really, another big thing that I particularly wanted to do was showcase the 17th century material. There is a lot out there that researchers don't know about and don't use, which could really help them. And I wanted to bring that to their attention and give them an in so that they could approach these old documents in a sort of easy way. You can see here that the Ordnance Survey, the back, I don't know if anybody buys maps anymore, other than sad people like me who love them. But on the back of your Ordnance Survey sheet, the townlands are all laid out on a greyed out version of the map. So you can see all the towns and buildings and roads that are on a modern map, but you can also see the townland boundaries drawn in over the top. This is brilliant. Why people don't... it's probably because people don't buy maps anymore, but it's a resource that should surely be used more. Now, townlands are old. This is a monastery land grant from 1183, and it basically, a lot of the page you see in front of you is a list of townland names, or villa, as they called them in the Latin. Those names, most of them are pretty clearly identifiable with the modern names, and I was able to get whole strings of them where you can actually follow them around current townland map spellings around Downpatrick, and you can see that every townland is represented. There's no gaps. Every townland has a name which has got its roots in its history, going back over 800 years. And it just goes to show you what a long established tradition. We've really no idea when they started, when they were named. And it's really a really fascinating area of study. So where to begin in producing an atlas? So, well, obviously, as I said, my particular interest is in the 17th century, so I decided to start there. And the reason being that that's really the first period for which we have comprehensive enough records to look at the province-wide. And obviously, Laura's work takes this back even further, and you can see that there are materials available to go back, but it's just not consistent enough to form an atlas for the whole province. What's stuck here? Oh, sorry. Okay, so this is some of the items which I would use quite regularly, and have used all of these in the preparation of my indexes and the atlas itself. So it's right from the beginning of the century, the Inquisitions, the Bodley maps, plantation grants, then the various post-plantation surveys to make sure that the people who had received grants were actually fulfilling their conditions, muster rolls published by the Foundation, the Civil Survey, the Down Survey, Hearth Money Rolls, Pender's Census, Books of Survey and Distribution, another fantastic large survey which is largely ignored and covers the entirety of Ulster with there are only, I think, 4 baronies of County Fermanagh which aren't covered. It's perhaps the most comprehensive of all of these, and then just local estate papers depending on particular estates. So this is the Bodley map for South County Londonderry, and you can see here what I did. This is how I started each barony in Ulster. If the Bodley map is available, I downloaded it, very kindly provided by Queen's through Laura, and I put in the names of the modern spellings of each townland name. You can't really see perhaps totally, but every name in that map is a separate name back in 1609. So, I mean, and they are again very recognisable. Very few have changed. Kilrea town is actually one of the very few that has. But because you're looking at a map, you can tell exactly what's missing, and you can fill in the gaps. These maps were not done by surveyors on the ground. Notes were made, and then someone back in the office drew the map based on the notes. A result of which Armagh Barony has the wonderful thing that as you move from left to right across the page, you're actually going from east to west. And trying to get your head around that, to try to work, what should the next townland be? Not one of my finest hours, but we got there in the end. A lot more accurate, and I'm constantly amazed by the accuracy of the 17th century surveyors. This is from the Down survey, which was during the Commonwealth period. And again, it's an example from County Londonderry, and it shows those townland. I have actually superimposed that map on an Ordnance Survey map, and the townland boundaries are exceptionally close. The acreages are really well done in Bodley. They just assumed every townland had 60 acres or 60 acres profitable land in it. But this gives you actual acreages, and everything is really, really well done. So, what makes a townland? Now, this is an extract from the Down survey for North Antrim. And you can see that the description of these place names, they don't use the word townland. They talk about the parcel of Corvallis, the 3 quarters of Novilly, plus another quarter called this, and the half town of Bonamargee, and another half town. And my favourite, this one of the 6 quarters of Ballytearam. I just love that. What a place that has 6 quarters. Brilliant. But you can see the figures they've put in are to do with profitable acres, and also those are identifiable with modern townlands. Corvallis is a townland. Novilly, including Gortramadry, is a townland. Bonamargee is a townland, including Turnanach Roken. Hope there's nobody from Ballycastle here. And finally, Lochan is one of the 6 quarters of Ballytearam, which is actually comprises now 17 or 19, I think it is, modern day townlands are contained within the 6 quarters of Ballytearam. Lochan itself has 4 townlands in it, which makes it difficult whenever you're looking back. If you know that you live in the townland of Lochan and you find a 16th century document referring to Lochan, you don't really know that it actually refers to the townland of Lochan. It could be one of the other 4 townlands that were within that quarter. Ballytearam would be even worse, because Ballytearam is a townland within a quarter called Ballytearam within the 6 quarters of Ballytearam. So your guess is as good as mine, but at least you know that is that area. And what my work has been, a lot of it has been trying to work out how these interact with each other, and at what stage we have decided to apply the term townland to those. I mean, that quarter of Novilly called Gortramadry had a distinct identity and name. Why did it not become a townland? Well, it's small and probably was owned by the same person. Novilly's quite a big townland. So, it's probably common ownership was why they did survive as 2 different townlands. There's a lot of very, very interesting work you can do once you get into these documents. Okay, that's from the Down survey. So then moving on to what I did with this information. I traced the Ordnance Survey sheets so that I had my own maps to begin with. I then plotted them and named them all from the Ordnance Survey, and tried to show all the townlands, the parishes, civil parishes I showed in red, Church of Ireland parishes in purple, Roman Catholic parishes in blue, so that you could see the boundaries of those areas, so you knew if your ancestors lived in a particular townland where they would have gone to church. And also the civil parishes are so important for civil administration. Showed the estates. Each of those colours represents an estate, a plantation estate. So you were able to say and see this is what I was talking about the context of the townland, which you can see the estates are not little square boxes. It's not like looking at an American map where they rule lines on pages and allocate this to him and this to him. They took the original measure of townland and divided it up. In the London companies, what they did was they actually valued each townland. And there's lists from 1613 of the actual value of each individual townland in the county, which were then divided up so that each of the 12 London companies would receive precisely to the farthing the same value of land as the others. So that kind of thing is really... And it explains why you have these sort of spilling down to the Bann and stretching up to the mountains. And it's to get the value the same, so they don't fit into a box like saying, oh, such and such a village, McCoskin here, so all the townlands around McCoskin must belong to the merchant tailors. It's much more complicated than that. And again, like Bogley, I have arranged my maps by barony. So how many baronies are there in Ulster? Well, I sort of fudge it a lot. There is there 80-ish. Okay, there are Coleraine, Londonderry, Carrickfergus, and Uri are not technically baronies, but they are. Then there's, what do you do with the half baronies? Cool and Knocknanny in Fermanagh. They're two half baronies, but they're separate. Banna and Boyla, neighbouring half baronies in Donegal, are always treated as a single barony from the imposition of baronies. So why they have two different names, I don't know. And then you have, in the 1830s, grand juries were given the power to divide up their baronies, and you get things like Upper and Lower Belfast, Upper and Lower Castlereagh, and so on. So there were 21 new baronies created under splitting up the old baronies. Ivey is my favourite. They divided it into Lower and Upper Ivey. Still too big. We've upper and lower halves of Lower Ivey. We've upper and lower halves of Upper Ivey. But then, even, down in the Mourns there's a lot of land to cover. So the upper half of Upper Ivey has a detached portion, which isn't actually in the same... So that's like sort of 5 baronies out of 1 there, although some of the same name. But that's why I say 80-ish. There's 81 if you count every unit, but they're not real baronies, all of them. But the thing about them is they're small enough to give you a good context. You see lots of estates, you see lots of parishes, you see lots of townlands, but they're still readable. Any bigger, if you did a county, you would need an enormous map to give it any sort of readability. And as I say, if it was good enough for Bodley, it was good enough for me. So we move on to what is contained within the indexes then. Now, the main index, there are several indexes to this book. The main index is for townlands, most important of all, and it lists over 16,000 townlands alphabetically. Now, that covers 267 pages of the book alone. There are some repeats because some townlands have got more than one name. At the very top of the screen there, you've Dramask stroke Ballycullen. Those are 2 alternative names for that townland. And so that will be under Ballycullen stroke Dramask somewhere else in the index. But other than that, there's no repeats. This gives you all the fine detail that would just be lost on a map. So you've got things like Ordnance Survey maps, so the registration districts, gives you the number of acres and so on to the nearest, gives you the Griffiths valuation landowner and also the name of the estate. And I'll tell you a wee bit more about how I've decided what an estate is in a second. So those are the doubles. Poor Law District was also incorporated but whenever civil registration came in. So if you're looking for birth, marriage, death certificates, it's exactly the same boundaries as for the poor law unions. So you can see I have given them all a wee 3-letter abbreviation. Otherwise, I wouldn't like having to write Carrickmacross many times into my index. It would soon fill up a page. But it's to sort of keep things readable and reasonably understandable. And the map just shows rough boundaries, because these are not marked on the barony maps. Shows you the boundaries of the poor law unions and shows where they spill from one county into another. In the green shading, ones where the workhouse or the market town in which the registration district was based is actually not in the province of Ulster, but it covers some parts of mostly Cavan, but also a wee bit of Armagh. Okay, one of my bugbears, and I'm sorry, Stephen, is that whenever I try to look up an Ordnance Survey map, a 6-inch series map in PRONI, I just don't know which one to go for, because they just list numbers. This tells you the sheet number for every single townland, so you can look it up in the book. It's great, particularly for Griffiths valuation maps. Tithe maps, again, an underused resource. This is one for Coleraine, and you can see how the individual farms are all marked, and those are numbered in the tithe allotment, and you can see the outline of the farm on the map here at PRONI. Moving forward then to parishes. The civil parishes, which we saw outlined in red, those are really the parishes which had been the common parishes of Roman Catholic and Church of Ireland administration at the beginning of the 16th century. So from moving forward from that, as obviously some civil parishes were added since, but generally speaking, they've continued. So the current list of civil parishes, which are what appears in a lot of records, are listed alphabetically by county, and then within that it describes what Church of Ireland parish churches are there now. Gives you details of when these new parishes were formed and when they were reunited because of falling populations, just basically giving you dates so that you can follow through. I lived on this piece of land, my family were Church of Ireland, therefore this is the church they probably belong to, and so on. Same for the Roman Catholic parishes, although I've started slightly differently with them. I've taken the 1702 registration of priests as my starting point, because basically before that it's all the civil parishes, and I've worked forward from that date, and the unions which were in place in 1704 I've treated as being basically civil parishes, which I then split up further. The Roman Catholic hierarchy, rather than creating new districts with new churches as their population grew, as the Church of Ireland did, they in general just built more chapels within the parish. So you can see that some parishes have maybe 4 or 5 churches within them, but they still are with under the one parish. So this again describes the history, when they were formed, what they were formed from, the dates various churches were built, so you can see where your family may have worshipped or your great-great-granny was baptised, and so on. You work your way through. All the details are there. It's all referenced to the maps. Oh, I've gone the wrong way. Finally then, of our big indexes are the manors or estates. Now, a lot of these, on the bodily maps, you may remember there were different shadings, as the same there are on my maps, and those represented the pre-plantation land ownership structures. So, and a lot, the old structure hierarchy based roughly would say that 1,000 acres was the estate of a sept under a Gaelic lord, and that would traditionally be maybe 12 to 15, 16 townlands, and it was nominally considered to be 1,000 acres in a lot of the plantation documents. And guess what the size of a plantation estate was? 1,000 acres, nominal acres. So it's not surprising that they roughly covered the same ground. So you can see that although a lot of these estates are laid out on paper, listed all the townlands for the first time in the 1600s, they actually represent a story which goes back much further. So, and these estates were, they may have been split up, they may have been added together, but generally speaking, they maintained their groupings right through up until the Land Purchase Acts and the early 20th century, whenever tenant farmers bought the farms en masse. Gives us details of who the original grantee was, where they're from, so you can tell where their tenants may be from. It doesn't just apply necessarily to English and Scottish planters, but also Irish grantees who may have received estates away from their traditional communities. So, like, for example, the O'Neills of the Fews in South Armagh, they would have probably moved tenants from Tyrone down to there, and so on and so forth. You can see a lot of these estates slightly changed. And in my notes to my estates, I have highlighted in bold the names of the families that have owned them over centuries. So whenever you're looking up for old deeds, if you ever use the index of the Registry of Deeds, you know how important it is to know the landlord, and this gives you all the surnames for that estate that you could look at over a period, and some of them go through the female line an unbelievable number of times. Milburn in Coleraine belonged to George Hamilton in the 1600s, who was one of the early mayors of Coleraine, and he had an only daughter who had an only daughter who had an only daughter. And gone down 5 generations. So Alfort Place in Coleraine is named after the Alforts, who are the 5th generation of a change of name every generation from Hamilton. It's just mind bending to try to get around it. And these are all the list of estates. I've done about the 493 biggest estates. I've ignored ones that were only a couple of townlands and so on. But just give their name, how they appear in all the different documents that I've referred to in the 17th century, with reference numbers so you can actually look them up, see who lived there, and details about them in those source documents. And that's really all I'm going to tell you about today. I'm hoping to do a talk in the new year where I actually go through in a lot of detail how I can see the book being used. But just really looking back, we can look sort of halfway back of the 800 years that we know townlands have been around for, and we just really have no idea how much further behind. We know they're very old. We know they're still used. There they are on the Modern Ordnance Survey printed map. They're intimate enough in scale that you can know your own townland, like every inch of it. You know all the hedges and you know it. And before the 20th century, they were absolutely essential to knowing everything about somebody who lived there, where they went to church, where they went to market, where they paid their rent, where they went to church. Just everything revolved around the units that the townland was the basis of. They really are a tangible link to history through their names, their continuity, and their boundaries, which are largely unchanged. And I just think they are an absolutely wonderful resource and something that we can all relate to. They're very much in the buzzword of today. Everybody wants to talk about them. I'm very, very glad to hear. And I just like you all to think about what's your personal townland. And you can see there down in the bottom corner, there is, Laura told you I came from Cool Hill. There it is in the Hansard map of 1622 when it was recorded as Culdrum Drina. So you can see the drum. The drum has been translated and Drina has been dropped, but it's recognisable. It's been there all that time, and because it's a piece of ground, it'll always be there, I suppose. So finally, we got the book, and I had this set up on my own laptop where I had a little list down the side which told me all the people I was going to thank, but Fintan has transferred it onto his laptop, which doesn't. So please don't look at the screen, and I shall go quickly to it and run down through my list of people that I have to thank. First of all, I'd like to thank Stephen and the staff of PRONI, both for tonight and for all your help during my research. I'd like to thank Joe Mahon for coming along this evening and drawing a crowd for me. I'd like to thank Bill McAfee, who was the first person to instigate this whole project back 10 years ago, and also Des McCabe of PRONI, who met with William and I about 2019, I think, and suggested that we make this into a book. I see he's had the good grace not to turn up tonight to see all the hard work. Various other people have contributed a lot of things, and I can't mention them all, but I'm just going to mention a few. Sean Barden in Armagh Museum, Kay Muir of the Northern Ireland Place Names Project, Laura, who's here tonight, Colm at Queen's, John Deneen for permission to use his grandfather's poem in the book, Terry Eakin for his work in the database, Terry Dooley for the foreword. I'd like to thank Carolyn being here. She's been wonderful support and a major reason why this book has got off the ground so quickly. Mary Jane, who's been our supporter of this project from the very start. Patricia, she's not here tonight, but I understand some of her family were hoping to. I don't know if they made it through the confusion. And Terry Cross, who provided financial and spiritual assistance to me when I went down to his distillery to get the check. He gave me a bottle of whiskey along with it, and I'd like to thank him for that. And Jim Thompson, another of our major sponsors, who again can't be here tonight. Mary Shrantz. Again, as Laura has mentioned, Wendy, I mean, you've done marvels with my work. You've made it look really fantastic. I can't thank you enough. All the staff at Ulster Historical Foundation, all down the back there, thank you very much. And last of all, I'd like to thank my family. My mum and dad are here, and my son Nick. David can't be here. And most of all, my wife Anu. Your love and support means everything and has got me here today. Thank you all. And thank you for actually coming along on a horrible evening as well.
Andrew, thank you very much. That was a really interesting insight, and I can't wait now to spend my Christmas looking up Townlands. You can see what I get up to in my spare time. I also think we should combine resources and figure out the origin of Townlands. That's our next project. I think it was a nice point that you focused on, and I've been thinking about for a while, is how you know your townland, even if you don't know what it is, you know your own area. And in this world of chaos and traffic and Disney on Ice, it's a nice place to go home to as a haven. So our next speaker is Joe Mahon, who needs absolutely no introduction, but he will get one anyway. He started his career as a school teacher, teaching English and history, and then went on to work in the BBC Radio Foil as a contributor, producer, and then manager, before making the move to TV, from which we all know him very well. He worked at the BBC and then took up a post with the independent production company Northland Films. Joe's best known as the presenter and producer of Lesser Spotted Ulster, Lesser Spotted Journeys, and Ulster Giants. Most recently, he has been exploring hidden gems in Mahon's Way, and I can't wait to hear about some of the townlands he's trespassed.
Thank you, Laura, for the introduction, and thank you as well for thanking me for drawing a crowd here. I gave the lie to that because I had to explain who it was to several people outside in the hall before I came in, you know. But anyway, I've only one criticism to make of this magnum opus, and that is that it is 30 years too late for my use, because I would have killed to get my hands on a resource such as this. It is a magnificent achievement, I have to tell you that, Andrew. The long winter nights must have been sped by whenever you were in the throes of that. It is the index alone is an extraordinary piece of research, and it's something that certainly would have benefited me and many others, I'm sure, in making programmes over many, many years. I have to say that as far as, can I move this here without endangering everything here? Yeah, I can do that. I hadn't a clue what a townland was until I was at least 11 years of age, because I was a city boy. I grew up in a city, I didn't realise I was probably living in a townland as well, and you've actually made that clearer for me tonight. So when did I discover that such things as townlands existed? It was whenever I attended St Colum's College in Derry. I was a day boy. And I think that there were about maybe 900 other day boys, city boys as they were called, or as I said, day boys. And the rest of them, about 300 others, they were boarders. And the boarders came from rather exotic places, as I remember hearing in the first time I did hear them. They came from places like, Ballinasgreen, Ballyscullion, Townland, and Balahi. And you would have thought that it was the job of the staff, a lot of them were priests back in those days, to work at a sort of entente cordiale between the day boys and the boarders. Nothing could be further from the truth, because they elevated the importance of the boarders who came from townlands far above us city boys, who were rather despised. In fact, they used to engineer snowball fights when day boys were coming in from their lunch at lunchtime, and there was snow out in the lawns, and you could see the dean, in charge of a crowd like Genghis Khan, firing snowballs at the boys, who would then probably chastised for being late back and from their lunchtime. Anyway, good relations weren't particularly fostered by the priests. Most of them probably came from townlands themselves, of course. Anyway, I thought that they were exotic places. I did befriend any number of boarders over the years, found them extremely interesting people, and they were always anxious to get to know the day boys because we were the source of chips being brought in at any time, and later on cigarettes. We'll say nothing about that. But there's one particular boarder friend of mine, and we met when we were about 13. His name was Dan Heaney, and he came from Balahi, via Tamnearan as well. And he had an older brother who you might have heard of, who'd already left the college at that stage. But Dan used to speak about him rather proudly. So Dan and I stayed in touch over many years. And in fact, the end point of the story is, in a sense, his brother, of course, was Seamus Heaney, the poet. And Dan himself had the same lovely, warm, engaging personality as Seamus Heaney has shown that he has over the years. And also a deep appreciation of a sense of place and where he came from. And just recently, I made a programme on the home place in Balahi, Seamus Heaney home place in Balahi. And afterwards, I got a text from Dan, and it'd been several years since we'd been in touch, and he sent me a very short text. I was nearly going to read it out tonight, but that would be sort of probably not fair to him. But anyway, he said, wonderful programme tonight, Joe. He said, Seamus would have been delighted with the understated and proud way in which you depicted the home place. And he said, it's the first time I've heard Sweet Fallalay for many, many years. And Sweet Fallalay, I have to tell you, was my answer to Seamus Heaney, because my wife's grandfather was a man called Hugh Cassidy, and he lived up in Fallalay, which is a townland just on the slopes of Glenshane. And he wrote this poem many, many years ago. He's long dead, of course. The man was, he died in the end of the 1940s. But when he was at himself, he was a mountainy farmer, as they say. Hugh Cassidy, well known in the area as a better poet than any man around the place. So I had sort of said to Dan, we've got our own poet on our end of the family as well. He was a man who wrote about the townlands as well. And he wrote a famous song in the area called Sweet Fallalay, which I then got another relation of mine to actually sing on the programme. I won't go into all the details of all of that, but he said, it's the first time I've heard Sweet Fallalay sung. And Sweet Fallalay was, as I said, a poem about the townland written by my wife's grandfather. He then sent it to Sam Henry, who put it into his collection, and he recorded it as well. So I think what I'm trying to get at is the importance that townland names, the significance of being from your townland. And Dan Heaney taught me this as well. He said, that is your badge, your identity. That is your passion. That's where you come from. If you don't believe me, look at a GAA match in South Derry, and you know what passion is like, because these people are attached to their townland and their parish, of course, but the townland particularly is becoming important. The next time that I heard about townlands after that phase of life was over was I remember in 1990, I was tasked with the job of the Tower Museum in Derry, which I'm sure some of you have been to at least anyway. It actually opened in 1990 or 91, not quite sure which. But I was tasked, Brian Lacey and a next man called Robin Wade commissioned me to do a number of films for the opening of the Tower Museum. They were short films, but one of them was about the Ordnance Survey. The original Ordnance Survey, which actually started on McGilligan Strand outside Derry by Thomas Colby, who had to measure a baseline for the trigonometrical measurement of the rest of the country, a baseline of, I think it was 7 miles plus whatever it was. And they did this using the crudest of instruments. He had to actually use a measuring bar and to get the baseline of this huge triangle, as it were. And it was interesting, however crude their instrumentation was, that whenever the modern Ordnance Survey came along and used lasers to measure the same baseline in the 20th century, they found that the 7-mile measurement was out by no more than a few inches, which is an extraordinary feat of engineering. So my introduction was to the Ordnance Survey and to an awful lot more information that the Ordnance Survey actually produced. We would not have anywhere near the information we have about townlands or parishes or anything else had it not been for this, what most people described as a peripatetic university from the 1820s right on through to the 50s until it was finally stopped. Not just because of the measurement and the maps that it produced, but because of the information that the map actually signified. I think it was Thomas Larkin who was the boss man and one of the officers he's only a captain at that stage. He eventually became Sir Thomas Larkin. But he was based in Phoenix Park in Dublin, and he said a map is a geographical index to a memoir. Okay, and I think that's what you've been signalling to us in your talk tonight. A map is a geographical index to a memoir. So a map is obviously, it can be a beautiful thing in its own right. It can contain lots and lots of information, but the information is contained within the map itself in the form of the names, in the form of the actual townland names, most of which, but not all, not exclusively, come from the Irish language, and most of which were presented to us all over the entire country by one individual in particular, more than any other. And this man became my hero. And when I first encountered him in that film that I made for the Ordnance Survey, his name, of course, was John O'Donovan, a name all of you here are familiar with. And I had this extraordinary sort of, don't know how you would call it, like epiphany or something like that. Whenever I first heard of and came across and read about John O'Donovan, I was absolutely bowled over by the sheer scope of this man's achievement in terms of not only the physical achievement of Shanksmere around most of the counties of Ireland. He went on foot, seeking out the original townland names, the most genuine and authentic version of it that he could find. I think he covered all the counties with the exception of Tyrone and Antrim and Cork. And I wondered, why did he leave those out? I think it's because they were too big, because he mostly travelled around either on foot or on horseback or in stagecoaches, which he frequently fell off. He travelled in the harshest of conditions for very little pay, staying in the worst possible digs. Now, I know Andrew had the same experience himself because he walked every single townland, didn't you, Andrew? And 16,000. Well, O'Donovan slightly beat you to it because he walked something like the 60,000 townlands in Ireland. Well, not all of them, but an awful lot of them. And he actually sourced 142,000 place names, not all of them townlands, obviously. But it was an extraordinary achievement from a man who was absolutely driven by the passion of discovery and of learning. And O'Donovan had this huge effect on me. Not only that, this is a true story. In 1990, the same year that the Tower Museum opened, we were actually moving house. My family, my own family, we were moving house from one part of the city to another. We moved out to the Cumore Road, out to Ballynagard direction, another townland. And our house was being built on a new development, and it was a bit of a height above Gilliland's house down there above Boom Hall, down in on the Kilmore Road. And at this stage, it was really not much more than a building site. And our plot, as we had, didn't have a name for the streets or anything like that. I think 112 or something like that. But anyway, moved into this development. Ours was one of the earliest houses there, and we started building houses around us. And one Saturday morning, I was woken up by workmen. I was cursing for still working this Saturday morning, getting me out of my bed, but they were banging away and hammering away and drilling away just at the foot of our street around the corner. And eventually I went down to see what they were doing. And they were sticking up the name of our street, the name of the place that I lived in and had lived in for the previous 6 months. Do you know what it was called? It was called O'Donovan Road. And I thought, no. Is it the same O'Donovan? Yes, it was. Because across from that was Larkham Drive, and round the corner was Petrie Way, and in the previous parallel street was Colby Avenue. All of this estate had been named by a developer who was also, like me, a big fan of the Ordnance Survey here. There was this peripatetic university of scientists and mathematicians and historians and linguists who had travelled the country for several years, creating the mass of the body of the knowledge that we have today. So O'Donovan was, it seemed to me, I only encountered him about 6 months before, and here he was, I was living in his street. Not only that, remember at the same time, this is really kind of spooky, my mother at the time, God rest her, was visiting a cousin of ours in Dublin at the time. My mother rarely travelled outside of the town, so this was a big occasion for her, going down to visit and stay in Dublin for a week. And when she came back again, she was, showing the photographs, and that's so-and-so, and that's your cousins, whatever. And she was outside this house with the railings, and it was a small Georgian terrace. I says, what's that blue plaque thing on the wall there behind you? Oh, aye, that's some famous guy that used to live in this house. And I got out the spyglass and looked closely at it. John O'Donovan lived here, and then the years, swear. And I could feel the hair, and I said, this man is haunting me. It was true. And from that time on, I never stopped thinking about the work of John O'Donovan in particular. Anytime I thought about Townland, O'Donovan's name came in. I mean, his job was to do with accuracy. That's one of the things I learned about him, that he was unceasing in his quest for accuracy. I'll give you a tiny example. There's a place near me in the Inishowen Peninsula, a place called Malin. And there's a kind of, Malin's a kind of separate but attached peninsula to the Inishowen Peninsula. I'm sure most of you know it. And there's a bay, a tide that comes in there into Malintown itself. And it's called Trabrega Bay. Okay? And when O'Donovan came across it, the map or whatever information he had, it was known as Strabrega Bay. And to you and me, that's so what? It's only a difference of one letter. But to O'Donovan, this was critical. Which is it? Sorry, he didn't know it was called Trabrega at all, because he gave it that name. When he went to Brega, the word Brega in Irish means lying, deceitful. And it meant to him, the word stra is a home, a meadow beside water, beside a river. Ard straw is another example of the same word, for example. But Strabrega would have meant to him the lying or deceitful home or meadow. And he thought, sea, this is a sea place. Ships find a very dangerous anchorage here. People who are out collecting seafood have been out and caught by the tide. And it's a big wide estuary whenever the tide is out. He said, clearly, it's not a Strabrega, it's a Trabrega, the lying and deceitful strand. And he was able to correct the Admiralty charts. And I remember thinking, what power. Imagine being able, because you're a linguist, because you've got something up here, because you have knowledge, you're able to change the way people look at the world and understand the environment. And O'Donovan and all of the people who worked on the Ordnance Survey had, but O'Donovan had, and prided himself on his knowledge and the accuracy of his knowledge. So the sad thing about John O'Donovan, of course, was he became, well, we all know this, so he became the first professor, the first chair of Celtic Studies at Queen's University. And the sad thing about it is this: in his inaugural lecture, which he gave when he first took up his chair, nobody attended the lecture. You know, it was a sad circumstance because he had no students, because it was a new chair, it was a new department. Also, I think he fell foul of the politics of the day, and that the Catholic Church thought this was a godless university, and anybody belonging to us, you know, we would shun them at this teach up there. And of course, the establishment in Belfast, that Irish studies, nah. So he was caught in between, in this sort of morass of ignorance on either side of him, and yet he had so much to tell the world and to do. He went on to do many, many other things, as we know, of course. I remember having the temerity, quite a few years after that, to propose. I'd already been doing Lesser Spotted Ulster for a while, and I had the temerity to propose a programme to the broadcaster, who shall be nameless. And I thought, this would be a wonderful programme, I thought anyway. And I called it In O'Donovan's Footsteps. And I wanted to do a series of programmes using O'Donovan's letters. He was an absolutely marvellous letter writer, by the way. Most of his letters are about historical fact and fiction and fables and myths and so on. Most of them are about the work that he was doing, but he's also a great humorist, and they're full of chat, they're full of gossip, and they're just a wonderful read. And I thought, it'd be great to go around the country and take the letter from this place or that place, and what O'Donovan did when he was there, who he met and who he talked to, and with a minimum amount of kind of dramatic reconstruction. This would be a really great programme. And I sent it into the broadcaster, and as I said, my proposal was not taken up, which was another way of saying it was rejected. And the reason, I was annoyed at the reason it was rejected, because I half expected them to say, and quite right, you know, who do you think you are? John O'Donovan, you walking around O'Donovan's footsteps, you know, you're not even a historian, never mind an archaeologist, and none of these things. How could you possibly emulate John O'Donovan? I wasn't trying to do that. I was trying to explain, going to make a light entertainment programme out of it all. And but no, they didn't say that. You know, I could have taken that, all right. What they did say was, who is John O'Donovan? And I was appalled. You know, I thought everybody knew about John. It's turned out no. As we know, we work in arcane kind of an atmosphere. Everybody works in history and archaeology and so on. And O'Donovan would have been much better known in his own day as one of the foremost scholars of the country. Not only that, he provided the most useful information that could be given at that day for these maps. Not only was it used for ownership and for understanding the legal requirement that you had to name a piece of land, but the fundamental thing is, once you name a piece of land, you can own it. If you don't have a name for it, you cannot own it. People had difficulty sometimes when the water level of lakes and rivers was lowered, a new land would be created, and somebody said, who owns this? Is this part of my land now? And the Crown said, no, it's not. This is new land. It's not yours at all. And it didn't have a name. And this became I mean, pretty obvious to nearly everybody that you have to have. I mean, where would we be without townlands? Well, you wouldn't be in Ireland, because we have 60,000 odd townlands in Ireland, and everywhere belongs to a townland. Every blade of grass or rock or stone or hole in the ground is part of a townland somewhere. I think Ireland is possibly unique in that regard. I'm not really sure. But we have more names than we know. I mean, the Irish were never done naming things. You name them everywhere you want. Everything had a name. And places, particularly, had a name. I'm going to do a wee quotation, which I rarely do. But this is, I'm sure you've all heard of Brian Fried's translations. Brian Fried's play translation was based on the activities of the survey. Now, Brian had all sorts of agendas for writing about that. He was talking about possibly the erosion of one culture and the replacement by another, and that O'Donovan was one of the people. And he invented a few people like O'Donovan, whose job it was to create the phonetic version of an old Irish, unpronounceable word to most of the people who would be reading this map. So his job was to make it into a pronounceable, but accurate. Accuracy was key to him, as I've already said, to make it into a pronounceable, phonetically accessible word to be read in English. Torbrega was what, there's some words that just don't want to translate, just keep them in the original Irish because they're so beautiful. And this is an extract from the play where you have a John O'Donovan type person, and he's talking, ironically, and this is not really like Friel, he's talking to the Lieutenant Yolland, who is the British officer, the sapper, in charge of this particular aspect of this area of name collecting. And he's talking to a man called Owen. And Owen's getting a bit short with him because Owen doesn't quite see, this is part of Friel's trickery, I think, Owen doesn't quite see why it's important to collect all of these names. But yet the British officer does. Strange. Anyway, I'm going to, bear with me, I just want to read, because I think it's important, this passage. It tells us so much. I have the wrong glasses on for reading this, but bear with me. Owen says to Yolland, "We've come to this crossroads. Come here and look at it, man. Look at it. And we call the crossroads Tubber Vree. And why do we call it Tubber Vree? I'll tell you why. Tubber means a well. But what does Vree mean? It's a corruption of Brian, an erosion of Tubber Brian. Because 150 years ago, there used to be a well here. Not at the crossroads, mind you, that would be too simple, but in a field close by the crossroads. And an old man called Brian, whose face was disfigured by an enormous growth, got it into his head that the water in that well was blessed. And every day for 7 months he went there and bathed his face in it. But the growth didn't go away. And one morning, Brian was found drowned in that well. And ever since then, that crossroads is known as Tubber Vree, Tubber Vrian, even though that well has long since dried up. I know this story because my grandfather told it to me. But ask Dolty or Myra or Bridget, even my father, even ask Manus, why it's called Tubber Vree, and what do you think? Do you think they'll know? I know they do not know. So the question I put to you, Lieutenant, is this. What do we do with a name like that? Do we scrap Tubber Vree altogether and call it what? The crossroads? Or do we keep piety with a man long dead, long forgotten, his name eroded beyond recognition, whose trivial little story nobody in the parish remembers? And Yolland answers, except you. Owen says, I've left here. And Yolland says, you remember it. Owen says, I'm asking you, what do we write in the name book? Yolland, Tubber Vree. Even though the well's 100 yards from the actual crossroads, and there's no well anyway, and what the hell does Vree mean? Tubber Vree. That's what you want? Yes. You're certain? Yes. Tubber Vree. Fine, that's what you'll get. Okay, that's the exchange. I'm beautifully acted, I thought myself. The point is, the officer was motivated to get accuracy. As well as that, even though Tubber Vree means nothing in his own language, he now knows the story of it. One man knew the story, only one man, and that's what makes it precious, and that's why it had to be preserved. Now he knew it as well, even though it was not the language that he spoke, and that's why he wanted to have Tubber Vree there for all time. Otherwise, erosion, and this is an example of how erosion happens, how erosion of a culture happens, how erosion of a language happens, that it disappears for all time. So that crucial passage, and there's many other things going on there which I won't bother analysing at the present time or trying to. And the point is really that every single piece of information that a townland name contains is coming down through centuries of either folklore or some other kind of tradition or history or family ownership or some kind of historical event. Also, there's symbolic meanings to a lot of these names. So we discard them at our peril. The map, or the book, the atlas that we have here today, is actually a treasure house of such names. And the index alone I could take away, and that would keep me working for the next 100 years to make programs. And I'm sure lots of researchers, lots of historians, lots of people for any purpose whatsoever who would be looking to make programs connected with townlands, connected with parishes, connected with the shape of the land itself. I'd love to get your hands on this book. I'm going to finish off, you'll be glad to hear, with This is Jim Dineen's uncle who he himself wrote that wee poem as well. All right, and it's just very, very short. The reason is that I wrote this wee poem to try and remind me of all of the townlands or places that I had been to at one stage, right? So there's 4,000 verses of it, and I'll only read you a few, don't worry. This is it's a piece of nonsense, really. But I remember very early on when we were making programs, or quite early on anyway, I have a producer called Liam Campbell, Dr. Liam Campbell. Many of you here will know Liam from the Mellon Centre for Migration Studies, my director there. But Liam was once my producer, and Liam's job was to go out, with another colleague, the two of them would go out around the countryside and find the places, find the people for us to go and film. We used to make, turn them over quite quickly back in those days. And I remember Liam once said to me, or I've said him, "Where are we going next, Liam? Or what have you got on the lines?" He said, "Well, next time round," he says, we're going to Antrim." And I have to explain the next statement, because quite often Liam would not only get people to be interviewed, he also loved getting me to be involved in some activity. Something could be digging turf or thatching, or at one stage it was falconry, some strange things, or another time working with ferrets. So it wasn't really all that surprising, but rather kind of revolting when he said to me, "We're going to County Antrim to kill rats." And I thought, kill rats? And I went away, and I thought, right. I went quite genuinely, honestly, I thought we were going to be going out with a rat catcher, okay? What we were doing, I didn't realise Kilrats was a place. Okay, put it that way. So this wee poem was just to sort of, I'll finish off with this. I'll only read a few bits. It was a way of me trying to remember to get as many townland names, and like Jim Dineen's poem does rather beautifully. So this is a wee bit of a nonsense. It's got an eternal rain thing. I enjoyed doing it. I must have been idle for a while to do this, right? It's called The Road to Kilrats, or Lesser Spotted Ulster. Were it not for the need some programmes to fill with places and people and chats, then I doubt in my car I'd have journeyed so far, and for sure not as far as Kilrats. I would still be a stranger to Mullabawn, the city of Clogher at that. I'd have made no acquaintance with Inishmixent, and would never have darkened Kilrats. I'd have missed out on Feeney, Benburb to boot, and Faughan with its attic of bats. I'd have passed Ballyscullion, the sweet ring of Gullion, and would never have heard of Kilrats. Or Annamecarrig, or Ballymagoland, or Belcoo's distinctive thatch. I would never have travelled the slopes of Gilnavel, and certainly not to Kilrats. In lofty Cairncastle I crawled underground, in Kinawley I wore mummers' hats. But I was a fool, and buoyed up at Dunguland, I thought I was fit for Kilrats. In Cullybackey I made my own wine, in Trillick I trimmed table mats. I did something similar in Rosslea and Inver, and finally went to Kilrats. I've been to Kilbrony, Clonallen and Burt, and Oher I ate cheese from vats. I've even been delving the depths of Loch. Did I tell you I've been to Kilrats? See, before I would venture, I'd study great works, local ologies, ographies, facts, mythological creatures, topographical features. I didn't do that for Kilrats. In a place called Drumskinny, just above Cash, I was eaten by midgets and gnats. And outside Rathfeiland, I sat and I tried and just couldn't get over Kilrats. I couldn't beat Banagher with a big stick. At Muckross I failed to catch brats. So after McGilligan, I had to begin again, facing life, having been to Kilrats. You see, I'd thought the name was a bold exhortation to emulate terriers and cats. The rodents to harass, and now I'm embarrassed of what I thought was meant by Kilrats. But up there in Antrim I met Mr. Blair, a scholar without any match. Of history and geography and even orthography, he's Alex, the sage of Kilrats. Alex sighed and explained about transliteration and anglicisation ersatz. Bilingual tautology, phonetic codology. I was wiser on leaving Kilrats. So for this lunch tonight I have learnt off by heart genealogies back to begats. So I know what the name is instead of what shame is, like the fool that I was in Kilrats. Thank you very much.
What a way to end the evening. Thank you very much, Joe. That was brilliant. I think it was interesting what you were saying about O'Donovan, and he kind of fell between two cultures when he started at Queen's, and so do Townlands, with Irish origins, but so many have been anglicised over the years to help us understand them. And maybe, just maybe, Townlands are a vehicle which we can learn to explore shared heritage and joint language and preserve that for generations to come. So our evening has drawn to a close, and as we all brace ourselves to face the weather, whatever traffic's left, and the exit of Disney on Ice, I would just like to make some thank yous on behalf of the Historical Foundation. Firstly, thank you to PRONI for hosting us tonight. It's been a wonderful evening. We would love to sincerely thank all the benefactors, patrons and donors, subscribers to the work that Andrew has produced. The belief shown in this project and Andrew's research has been widespread and gratefully received. If you flick through the preliminary pages, which I have done, and I think it's a lovely thing to do, you'll see that this project has had many, many supporters and some very familiar names. And while it would be impossible to mention them all, and perhaps a little unfair to mention some and not others, this book simply could not have happened without the generosity of several individuals, and I will embarrass them by naming them. So the Cooper Richards Foundation, Richardson Foundation, who are represented here by Carlin tonight, Patricia O'Callaghan, who unfortunately, as Andrew said, can't be here, Mary Jane Kuffner-Hurt of Pittsburgh, who was the first benefactor to lend her support, the late Mary, pronunciation, there you go, thank you for, for that, of Sturgeon Bay, a regular donor to the foundation, and James Thompson of County Waterford, who is also unable to be here this evening. And of course, once again, we thank all the contributors to this book for your generosity and your patience. You have helped achieve our goal, and we hope you enjoy it and find it an invaluable research aid. Thank you very much for coming tonight.